What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my recap, reaction, and review of the 6th episode of the Paramount Plus drama series, Landman. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So, as we've steamed past the midpoint of the season here, I've started to see the cracks showing in this story. And don't get me wrong, it's not a total deal breaker because all shows have them. Every single show that we've ever watched. It's just a matter of how big the cracks are and their impact on the overall telling of the tale. I think I'm over Tommy and Angela at this point. All they do is have sex and fight. And in that, all Tommy does is remind Angela that their relationship can't work. And speaking of Angela, the character has proven to be essentially useless to this point, narratively speaking. She doesn't have anything to do, and as a matter of fact, neither does Ainsley. I think Ainsley needs to hurry up and go back to school. This story could have been told with Angela simply talking to Tommy via FaceTime and Cooper being the only kid they had together. It's almost like Ainsley and, by extension, Angela are just in the show to be eye candy and to kind of wreak havoc. Though I do find Ainsley to be charming, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get something in this last part of the season that changes my mind about all that. Now, moving forward, the most compelling part of the story has become Cooper and Ariana's relationship and how that will progress, as well as Tommy's dealings with the cartel. And so, if you're asking me what I'm looking forward to most moving forward, it's those two things. Now, episode 6, entitled Beware the Second Beating, starts with Tommy and Angela arriving at Monty's house. Now, Tommy wakes Angela, who's been sleeping in the passenger seat, and explains that they've arrived at Monty's house. And Angela asks Tommy what time his meeting is. Tommy looks at his phone, and he explains that his meeting is now. Angela tells Tommy that she's going to head to Victor's house and have the talk. She checks her phone and realizes that it's a 10-minute wait for an Uber, so she asks Tommy to leave the truck on so she doesn't melt in the heat. Tommy tells Angela that she should just take his truck. That way she won't melt and she won't need an Uber. Angela explains that she can't get her car back to Midland if she takes his truck. Tommy explains that she doesn't need to get her car today. And Angela explains that she's not leaving without it. That she doesn't care if she has to, go down on Victor for the keys. That Tommy will just have to man up and move past it. And Tommy tells Angela to just buy a toothbrush on the way home, and he gets out of the truck. Now he walks towards the entrance of the house and is met on the balcony by Cammie Miller, Monty's wife. She asks how he is, and Tommy replies, "The world is my oyster, Cammie, what can I tell you?" Cammie remarks that she remembers that oyster. Tommy looks back at Angela, who is in the truck doing her makeup, and then he explains to Cammie that he and Angela's divorce was so fun that they thought they'd try it again. Cammie explains that Angela can come in the house, but Tommy explains that Angela has to go and break up with her husband. Cammie remarks that life is much more interesting when he and Angela are together and that he can come on in. Now, upon entering the house, Tommy and Cammie share a hug before she tells him that Monty's almost done with his meeting, and she then asks Tommy if she can get him something to drink. Now, Tommy asks for a cup of coffee, and Cammie tells him that she'll make some, and that he can go on into Monty's office. Now, Tommy walks down the long hallway, decorated with expensive-looking art and paintings, and finds Monty on the phone next to his balcony. Now, Monty ends the call, and he asks Tommy how he is. Tommy explains that it's been a week. Monty asks about the accident, and Tommy explains that Rick, my man Rick, may he rest in peace, was standing on something he shouldn't have been standing on. Monty asks if he's exposed. Tommy replies, "That's a lawyer question." Monty explains to Tommy that at this point he's as much a lawyer as anybody else. And Tommy replies, "Well, the pipes came in a mixed bundle, which is not what we ordered. He knew better than to be standing up there. Negligence is his. It don't make the pill the wife's got to swallow any easier." Now, Monty assures Tommy that they'll take care of the family, and then he invites Tommy to sit down. Now, at that point, the door of the balcony swings open, and Gracie, Monty's daughter, and some of her friends come inside wearing swimsuits to get what looked like to be alcoholic drinks. Monty explains to Gracie that if they spill any of the drink on the carpet, that their mother's going to kill them. Tommy asks if the girls are on break. Monty shakes his head no and explains that convincing his daughter to go to TCU is one of the greatest accomplishments. He goes on to explain that if his daughters want to mess around with boys and drink margaritas, that they can do it by the pool. That if they want to go to the bars, his driver takes them and picks them up. He then explains to Tommy that his time is coming soon and asks if he has a plan. And Tommy explains that he's going to cement rebar into a cinder block and chain Ainsley to it until she's 30. Monty laughs, explaining that Ainsley will chew right through it. Tommy replies, her mother might. Monty asks if the lease thing has been worked out. Tommy claims that it has. Monty replies, I understand TTP is seeing things our way. And Tommy replies, this little lawyer's a pit bull, I tell you. Monty replies, so I hear. How about the well thing? That working out? Tommy explains that he offered bereavement payments to the families. Monty asks how much. Tommy explains that they have to go north of $250 to make it stick. At that point, Cammie brings Tommy his coffee, and he thanks her. She then hands Monty a drink and asks Tommy if he's staying for dinner. And Tommy explains that he wishes that he could, but that he should get going. He tells Cammie that it's good to see her, though, as she walks out of the room. Now, at that point, Monty exclaims, so you called a meeting. And Tommy explains that the route that goes through the land acquired in the Hermosa Field lease is a route for drugs headed north. Monty replies, yeah, they stole our plane. Tommy explains that they want compensation for the product they lost, and Monty laughs before replying, get in line. Tommy explains that they made threats and that the crew is spooked, that they don't want to work in the field. Monty explains that that's not an option. Tommy asks Monty if he has any senators in his Rolodex. He asks if maybe the Army wants to come down and play war games for a few weeks. Monty asks who is drilling in that field, and Tommy explains that everybody is, BP, Marathon, and Chevron. Monty tells Tommy that he'll make a few calls. Tommy asks if he can make them fast, that they're supposed to be clearing pads next week. Monty puts down the drink, begrudgingly, and he takes out his phone and leaves the room. And Tommy sits there, kind of looking around, almost as if he's jealous of Monty's success and, I guess, Tommy's perceived failures. And back in the truck, Tommy's phone rings, but there's no one there to answer it. And we see that Tommy has 12 missed calls from one Sheriff Joburg. Roll opening credits. So from there, we see my man Nathan and Rebecca pull up to Louise's house. They get out of his truck and they approach the home. Nathan stops Rebecca and asks if she's ever faced widows and orphans and tried to assign a monetary value to their loved ones' lives. Rebecca says she's done it more times than she can count, but not under these specific circumstances. Nathan tells her to leave out a lawyer out on the porch, and the pair approach the front door. Now, inside the home, they sit with the widows, including Ariana, to discuss a settlement. And as the widows look over the agreements, they speak to each other in Spanish. Nathan explains that the section of the document they are looking at explains that accepting the settlement does not nullify any insurance policies that their husbands might have had, and that they each had term policies through the company with death benefits of $25,000. Now, Ariana asks what they're supposed to do with $25K, and Nathan explains that it's a nominal amount to cover funeral expenses, and that it's standard through their medical insurance. Ariana asks about their medical insurance, and Nathan explains that they'll remain on their husband's policies for 18 months, and that then they can extend the policy at their own expense. Now, at that point, Nathan puts a check down on the table and explains that the money is a bereavement offer, that it means that the company recognizes the challenges that the families will face and that they'll help them overcome those challenges. The women again start speaking to each other in Spanish, and Ariana just stares down at the check. Louise's widow then asks what the catch is. Nathan claims there is no catch. There's always a catch. Louise's widow then asks what the company wants from them, and Nathan claims that they don't want anything except the signature that they received them. Both Luis and Armando's widow sign immediately, but Ariana just flips through the document suspiciously before asking what indemnify means. Nathan explains that refers to liability and waiving assertions of culpability. Ariana then asks what an assertion is, what culpability is. And Nathan explains that those are legal terms and that they mean that they can't decide in 10 years that the accident was the company's fault. And Ariana thinks before replying, what if it was your fault? Nathan explains that it wasn't the company's fault, that it wasn't their husband's fault. He makes it clear that it wasn't anybody's fault, and Ariana simply replies, but what if it was? Now, at that point, Rebecca jumps in and explains, then you'd have to prove it. You'd have to give that check back, go hire a lawyer, one better than our lawyers, and prove it was our fault, while we try to prove it was yours. Nathan interjects and explains, what she means is none of us wants to fight. This is a tragedy, and we would rather openly offer money to help you through it than to fight about blame. Ariana then asks, but if you're not to blame, why would you offer us anything? And Rebecca jumps back in, explaining that it's cheaper than proving it. The room then gets quiet, and Ariana excuses herself, and she calls Cooper. But when she calls Cooper, Sheriff Joburg answers the phone, and Ariana, confused, claims to have dialed the wrong number. Sheriff Joburg asks Ariana if she's calling for Cooper Norris, and she says that she is. Sheriff Joburg then asks if she's a friend, and Ariana replies, I think so. Did something happen to him? Sheriff Joburg asks Ariana for her name, and she gives it before he asks how she knows Cooper. And Ariana explains that Cooper worked for her husband's crew before asking if someone hurt Cooper. Sheriff Joburg then explains that someone did hurt Cooper really bad and asks if she knows anybody who would want to do that. And Ariana asks where it happened, and Sheriff Joburg explains that it happened in Cooper's trailer at the man camp before asking Ariana if she knows anybody who would want to hurt Cooper. Ariana says she does, and Sheriff Joburg asks her who, and she immediately replies, Manuel Lopez. She then tells Sheriff Joburg that Manuel threatened Cooper at her house. Sheriff Joburg asks how Manuel threatened Cooper, and she replies, with a gun, threatened to kill him. So Sheriff Joburg asks why he would do that, and Ariana explains that Manuel was jealous of Cooper before asking how badly Cooper was hurt. Sheriff Joburg then explains that it depends on how the night goes, that Manuel's threat may yet come true. He then asks Ariana for her last name, and Ariana asks what hospital Cooper's in. Sheriff Joburg explains that he's going to need Ariana's last name in a statement, and Ariana explains to the sheriff that if he wants a statement that he could come to the hospital and get it before asking again, angrily this time, which hospital. Sheriff Joburg replies Midland General, and Ariana hangs up the phone. She walks back into the room and speaks to the other widows in Spanish before grabbing her things and exiting the house in a hurry. Nathan then asks if everything is okay, and Luis's widow replies, I don't think so. I didn't like Ariana's, the way that she was about all this because, if Ariana wants Manuel to pay for what he did badly enough to give his name immediately, then why would you be giving the police officer a hard time that's actually trying to help you get what you want, which is justice for Cooper's beating? But I digress. Now from there we go to Aledo, and we see Angela arriving at Victor's house by Uber. And upon exiting the vehicle and approaching the house, she finds that her key doesn't work anymore. Now, she rings the doorbell, and a female associate of the law firm of Brown, Mayer, and Hammond, named Madison, answers, introducing herself before inviting Angela to come inside. Now, upon entering the house, a man named Nelson Means introduces himself and asks Angela, and Angela asks where Victor is. Now, Nelson explains that Victor has engaged their services to assist in the dissolution of the marriage, and then he asks Angela to have a seat. She sits at the table with the pair and asks to speak to Victor, but Nelson explains that Victor would prefer the prenup be fully executed prior to any contact. He then directs Angela's attention to the paragraph 9 in the document, the infidelity clause of the agreement, stating that that should she engage in adultery, that the settlement portion of the agreement would be nullified. Now, Angela asks who she committed adultery with, and Nelson replies, is it your statement that you did not engage in sexual relations with a Mr. Thomas Norris? Angela flippantly explains that it's not adultery because Tommy's her ex-husband. Now, Nelson explains to Angela that that is the very definition of adultery, and that based on her efforts to travel to him, that the affair was premeditated. And I agree. Angela asks what he means by that. Nelson explains that that means that she was thinking about it before she did it. Angela asks, that's a crime now? I thought about fucking Tommy while I was fucking Victor. Nelson explains that nothing Angela has done is criminal, but that pursuant to the agreement, all community property reverts back to Mr. Ramsey, as in Victor. Angela asks Nelson to define community property, and Nelson replies, this residence, the house in Aspen, the ranch outside Morgan, the residence in Cabo, all liquid investments, all cash in the joint accounts, all access to joint credit cards and automobiles. Angela asks which automobiles, and Nelson replies, the Range Rovers, the Audi A8, the Lincoln Navigator, and at that point, Angela interrupts and says, just get to the effing Bentley. Now, Nelson explains that the Bentley was a gift and that all gifts are her separate property. Angela replies, hey, well, now we're getting somewhere. Before asking Nelson to define gifts, Nathan then explains that any jewelry, clothing, and accessories like handbags and luggage, he explains to Angela that she has a personal bank account with just over $300,000 in it, and that those funds Victor will concede to her. Nelson also explains that they have calculated child support payments for Ainsley through her 18th birthday. Nelson also explains that Victor wrote a letter to Ainsley and asked that it be delivered to her. And Angela's not going to deliver that letter. Angela then asks if there's anything else. Nelson slides a contract over to Angela and asks her to sign it, and she does before demanding the keys to her car. Nelson explains that the keys are in the Bentley, and Angela grabs her purse, gets up from the table, asking to get her things. Nelson explains that her things have been shipped to Tommy's residence in Midland and that the rest of her things have been packed and placed inside the vehicle. He then explains to Angela that Madison will show her to the garage, and Angela replies, "I know where the garage is," before storming out of the room. Now, Angela stomps angrily through the house until she looks out the window and sees people out back in the pool. And at that point, a younger woman named Savannah enters and stands there in a bikini staring at Angela, and she asks, "What the F are you looking at?" Savannah chuckles before asking, "You the one that left him?" Now, Savannah gets a drink from the refrigerator before continuing, "I hope it's true love, because you're a little long in the tooth to come crawling back and try to kick me out of his bed." Angela replies, "I just pull you out by your fucking hair." Now, Savannah smiles and replies, "Ooh, that could be fun." And then Angela walks out. She enters the wine cellar and takes a few bottles before entering the garage finally, getting in her Bentley, opening the garage door with the garage door opener, and driving out, tossing the garage door opener out the window as she drives off. Now, from there, we go back to Monty's house, and Tommy is still there drinking his coffee. And Monty asks how long it's been since he had a drink. Tommy claims it's been 9 years without a whiskey. Notice he said whiskey. Monty asks if he misses it, and Tommy explains that he's too scared of it to miss it. Tommy then asks Monty how worried he is about the green initiatives, and Monty explains that the two biggest backers of the green initiatives are Saudi Arabia and Russia. And here we get into the part where we're made to eat our vegetables, right? Before he asks Tommy why he thinks that is. Tommy answers that if they reduce their output, that they'll be more reliant on output from other countries. Monty explains that once that happens, that there'll be a huge demand for output from them, and then we'll be right back in the middle of an oil boom, or maybe the administration changes and the oil boom comes 2 years later. That it's manipulating supply to increase demand, and that they've been doing it since they've been harvesting sorghum in the fields of the Nile River Valley. And I happen to believe that that's absolutely true. Now, at that point, Monty's phone starts vibrating, and he asks why Nathan is calling his phone. Tommy explains that he left his phone in the truck. Monty answers the call, asking Nathan if he wants him or Tommy. He then hands the phone to Tommy, and Tommy apologizes to Nathan for leaving his phone in the truck before asking how the presentation to the widows went. Nathan explains that he has some bad news, and Tommy remarks that the presentation shouldn't have been that difficult before Nathan finally explains that Cooper was attacked, that he's in surgery at General, and that he sent Ainsley over there already. Tommy asks why Cooper was attacked. Nathan explains that he doesn't know, but that Sheriff Joburg is expecting his call. And at that point, Tommy hangs up and hands Monty back his phone, explaining that he has to go. Monty asks if there's a problem, and Tommy simply replies, "Always," before rushing out. Now, from there, we see Tommy tearing down the highway when he gets a call from Angela, claiming that she feels like a whore, and that she got to meet her whore replacement on the way out, that the little bitch was so young she still had dimples above her ass cheeks. Tommy explains to Angela that there's been an emergency and that he'll have to call her back, and he hangs up. I really don't understand why Angela's character was written the way she was written, but we'll get to that later. Tommy then calls Sheriff Joburg and asks him to walk him through what happened. Sheriff Joburg explains that he found Cooper unconscious in his trailer, that he took a real good beating, that EMS said he had a collapsed lung, and that they were worried about the shots to his head. He goes on to explain that he was still out when they got him on the chopper. He tells Tommy that it was bad. Tommy thinks for a moment before asking the sheriff if he had any suspects, and Sheriff Joburg asks Tommy if he knows a Manuel Lopez. Tommy says he does, that he works on Cooper's crew. Sheriff Joburg explains that he threatened Cooper with a pistol earlier in the day, and Tommy asks over what, and Sheriff Joburg replies, "A girl, what else?" And then he says, "I know you like to handle this in-house, but this one's on the radar." Tommy replies, "Well, we'll both handle it, all right?" Sheriff Joburg asks Tommy to simply leave him something to arrest. Now, at that point, Tommy hangs up just in time for Angela to call back, because TV shows. And Angela remarks, "Don't mind me, I'm just schlepping my whore ass back to Midland to make a new life with the man of my dreams who hangs up on me when I need some fucking compassion." Tommy explains to Angela that Cooper's in the hospital, again, that he's in surgery, that he doesn't know for what or for how long, but that he'll let her know when he knows. He goes on to explain that he's headed to the hospital and that she needs to do the same. Angela simply says okay and Tommy tells her that he loves her before ending the call. Now, next we see Ariana entering the hospital, at night because, shooting schedules. And upon entering, she sits in the waiting area distraught just as the doctor enters and calls Cooper's name. Now, Ainsley and Dale both get up, as does Ariana, and the doctor explains that Cooper is in recovery, that his right lung collapsed and that they inserted a chest tube between his ribs in order to drain the air and allow the lung to expand, that they'll need to leave it in for several days. He also explains that there is some brain swelling and that it's something they'll continue to monitor. Now, Ainsley says okay and thanks the doctor for the update, and at that point, Dale excuses himself to call Tommy and give him the update, and you know why he does that? So Ainsley can look directly at Ariana and ask, as she does, "Who are you?" Ariana replies by asking Ainsley who she is, even though she's clearly higher on the family totem pole, but, whatevs. Now, Ainsley explains that she's Cooper's sister before asking, "Your turn." And Ariana states that she's harder to explain, and Ainsley simply replies, "You just explained it." And at that point, Ariana goes back to her seat, as does Ainsley. Now, some time passes, and Ariana takes a call in Spanish before getting up and moving to a more private part of the waiting area where she sits down and begins pumping, to Ainsley's surprise and apparent concern. And at that point, a nurse shows up and explains that they've taken Cooper to his room and that they'll show them the way. And everybody, including Ariana, gets up and follows the nurse. Now, Tommy is still on the road, and he gets another call from Angela asking what he knows. He explains that Cooper punctured a lung, that he has a concussion and some broken ribs and a pile of bruises. Angela asks if he was in a car wreck, and Tommy explains that it was a fight, that a bunch of guys jumped Cooper in his trailer. Angela explains that this is why she didn't want him working on the patch, that it's all felons and thugs. Tommy explains that he didn't want Cooper on the patch either, but that if he's going to work on the patch, that he's going to work with him because it's the only way he can protect him. And Angela replies, "You're doing a bang-up job of that. Second week here, second week in the fucking hospital." Tommy replies, "Trust me, honey, I'll handle this, okay? And if you want to talk him out of working on the patch, be my guest." Angela then asks Tommy how far out he is, and Tommy tells her about 30 minutes. Then asks where she is, and she tells Tommy that she's in the parking lot. Tommy then asks Angela if she flew, and Angela replies, "You bet your ass I did." Tommy then asks, "Well, why aren't you in the hospital with our son then?" And Angela replies, "Because if the kid lost an effing leg, I want to know before I see it. I need to be strong for him, Tommy. He doesn't need to see his mother freaking the fuck out." Tommy remarks that would shock the shit right out of him. And Angela replies, "I'm waiting for you, so hurry the F up." Tommy explains that he's on his way and ends the call. He then calls Theodore Ramon, and we see Boss at home playing video games with his son. His phone rings and he answers, asking Tommy what's up. Tommy replies, "Nothing much, just driving to the hospital to see my beat to shit son." Boss sits up and asks, "Do what now?" Tommy continues, and guess who did it? Boss asks who, and Tommy explains that it was Manuel and Antonio before asking Boss what his boys are doing putting his son in the hospital. Boss tells Tommy that he'll have the situation handled before dawn, and Tommy explains that Boss had his chance to handle it before instructing him to find 5 thumpers, as he says, that don't play on their side of the sandbox and to keep his phone on. So you know what that means, 5 black dudes. Now, back at the hospital, we see Cooper laid up in his room. Now, Dale knocks on the door and he and Ainsley enter the room. Dale asks Cooper how he's feeling, and Cooper explains that he's been better as Ariana enters the room behind him. Now, Dale explains that broken ribs are the worst before telling Cooper not to laugh or sneeze. Ainsley looks shocked before Cooper asks what she's doing there, and Ainsley explains that she was waiting for 5 hours to see if he lived through surgery, and Cooper replies, "Sorry to disappoint." He then sees Ariana standing in the corner of the room by the door. Dale notices and tells Cooper that they're going to wait outside. He asks Cooper if he needs anything like a pack of cigarettes. Cooper laughs and then cringes in pain before reminding Dale that he told him not to laugh. Dale apologizes before telling Cooper again that they'll be right outside, and on the way out, he advises Ainsley to give Cooper and Ariana some space. Ainsley tells Cooper that she missed her first patch party for him, and Cooper explains that there'll be plenty of chlamydia at the next one, and then Ainsley exits the room, leaving Ariana and Cooper in the room alone. Now, Cooper immediately explains to Ariana that the situation isn't her fault, and I disagree mightily. She apologizes to him anyway. She walks to the bed and grabs Cooper's hand before telling him that he doesn't deserve what happened to him. Cooper explains to her that deserve doesn't factor into it, that Manuel didn't beat him up for LVO, that he did it for himself. Which, I mean, that doesn't shock me completely, that maybe Manuel had designs on Ariana himself, and that maybe that's why he was so angry about Cooper kind of jumping the line, so to speak. Now, at that point, Tommy finally arrives at the hospital. Angela asks if he drove there in reverse. Tommy explains that he doesn't have a Batmobile like she does, and he and Angela go inside together. Now, they find Dale and Ainsley in the lobby with Dale eating Cheetos and drinking a soda. Tommy asks Ainsley if Cooper is asleep, and Ainsley explains that he's in the room talking to his girlfriend. Tommy asks who his girlfriend is, and Ainsley claims she doesn't know, and Tommy goes back to see him. Angela chastises Dale for eating junk, but he replies, "They settle in the hospital, Angela. How bad could it be?" I see his logic there, but no, man. And then Angela hugs Ainsley. Now, Tommy sees Sheriff Joburg in the hall, and he tells Tommy that Cooper's either real tough or real lucky. Tommy asks Sheriff Joburg if he's been in with him yet, and Sheriff Joburg explains that he's in talking with his girlfriend. Tommy continues down the hall, asking out loud, who is this effing girlfriend? Now, he gets to the room and finds Cooper asleep, and he finds Ariana sitting next to him, and he asks how she's holding up and how her kid is doing. Now, Ariana becomes emotional but claims that the baby is good. He then asks Ariana how she is. She doesn't really answer the question, but Tommy empathizes with her situation anyway. And at that point, Angela walks into the room and sees Cooper laid up, and she does the one thing she said she wouldn't. She freaks the F out and demands that Tommy do something about the people who hurt her son. Now, Cooper wakes from all the yelling, and Angela explains to Cooper that she's there for him. Tommy tells Angela to go out in the hallway and take a Xanax and wait until it kicks in before she comes back. And as Angela leaves, Tommy apologizes to Ariana, explaining that Angela gets worked up over her kids. And Ariana explains that she's Mexican, so there's no need for an explanation. She understands. He then asks for a minute alone with Cooper, and Ariana explains she needs to get back to her son anyway, and she leaves, telling Cooper to call her if he needs anything, and that she'll be back tomorrow. Now, Tommy sits down next to Cooper and stares at him. And Cooper explains that nothing is going on with him and Ariana, that her husband just died and that she called for help, and he gave it. Tommy explains, she's not my concern, you are. And at the moment, that the fuckers that put you in the hospital are my main concern. Now, Cooper is worried about his father stepping in, but Tommy explains that he's not talking as Cooper's dad, that he's talking as the general manager of an oil company, and that when an employee breaks into another employee's company-provided housing and beats the dog shit out of him to the point where a surgeon has to reinflate his lung, that he's going to step in. He then asks Manuel and Antonio, who else? Now, Cooper doesn't speak, and Tommy continues, you can tell me or I'll beat it out of the first two. Cooper explains that he doesn't know their names, but that they're the maintenance crew for the Buffalo field. Tommy replies, that's all you had to say. He then goes on to explain to Cooper that he's going to have to go slow with Ariana, that she's hurting in a way that he can't understand and that she's trying to find somewhere to put it. Cooper explains that it's not like that. And Tommy asks, how many widows do you think are sitting in this hospital tonight with their helpers? Tommy then stands and continues, this ain't the first beating you took over this girl. This is the kind of beating you get when the first one didn't take, hence the episode title. Now, at that point, Tommy's phone starts buzzing and he answers it. It's the security guard over at the man camp who tells Tommy that Manuel just got back to his room with his roommate. And Tommy instructs him to turn off the camera and not to cut them back on until he tells him to. Tommy then leaves Cooper's room. Sheriff Joburg asks if he can talk to Cooper now, and Tommy explains that there's no need, that he should meet him at the man camp and give him a 10-minute head start. Now, Tommy goes back into the lobby, and Angela seems much more relaxed, almost comatose, but I see what she did there. She asks Tommy if she can go to see Cooper now, and he replies, he's all yours. He then turns to Dale and asks Dale if he has any plans for the night, and Dale responds, soon as you give them to me. Love to learn. Tommy replies, let's go. He then tells Ainsley not to let her mother drive, and Tommy and Dale leave the hospital together. Now, they arrive at the man camp, and Tommy and Dale exit the vehicle. Tommy takes a pipe wrench out of the back of the truck and asks Dale if he wants something. Dale holds up what looks like a blackjack and explains that he never leaves home without it. And at that point, Boss shows up with a group of men, and Tommy explains that he might not get to use it, and the men approach Manuel's trailer. Now, inside the trailer, Manuel and Antonio are watching television. There's a knock at the door, and the pair seem surprised to have visitors. Manuel gets up and notices that it's Tommy. He tells Antonio that it's the boss. Antonio tells him not to answer. Tommy yells out to the men, explaining that he can hear them, so Manuel finally opens the door, and Tommy immediately hits him across the face with the wrench, knocking him to the ground. He then turns to Antonio and points at him asking, "This seem familiar, mother effer?" Antonio puts his hands up as Tommy approaches and beats him with the same wrench. He then exclaims, "You get on the phone and call your effing friends. You know, the ones that you called that put my effing son in the hospital." Now, Antonio looks up at him in silence. Tommy turns to Boss and exclaims, "He don't want to call his friends, boss." Boss replies, "Me and my boys will take him in the back." Tommy replies, "I'd appreciate that." And they drag Antonio into the bedroom. Now, Manuel tries to get up, but Dale hits him with the blackjack, explaining that nobody said he could get up. But Tommy tells him to stand up and have a seat, and he does. Tommy goes on to explain to Manuel that he's fired and that by tomorrow he'll be on a no-hire list for every oil company in the Permian Basin. He then explains that the sheriff is going to be here in about 5 minutes, and he's going to toss this place. And my guess is he's going to add felony possession of a firearm, possession of a controlled substance, and maybe possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. And any goddamn one of those violates your parole. And then you add on top of that shit aggravated assault charge and kidnapping. Because when you shut the door on him, that was kidnapping. And I ain't a goddamn mathematician, but that's like 30 years. That's what I do to people who hurt my family. You F with the wrong hillbilly. Bars. Bars. Now, at that point, we hear the police sirens, and Tommy continues, "I'm going to take 30 years of your life from you, and if you ever come back to this place, I'm going to take the rest of it." More bars. Sheriff Joburg enters the trailer, and Tommy asks, "Have you met the sheriff?" Sheriff Joburg asks Manuel to stand up and turn around. Manuel does and is formally arrested. Now, Tommy explains that there's a confession going on in the back room, and at that point, Boss exits said room. Now, Tommy asks if Antonio had anything to say, and Boss explains that he gave up the names, that he even wrote them down for him. Sheriff Joburg asks if he thinks Antonio would repeat them to him, and Boss explains that he's sure he would if asked, and then they all walk back to the bedroom. Now, Sheriff Joburg then asks Antonio, who was cowering in the corner of the room, if he would confirm the names of the other assailants. And Antonio asks the sheriff if he plans to take him with them. And Sheriff Joburg replies, "That depends. You going to say something, give me a reason?" Antonio replies, "I'll give you a reason." And Sheriff Joburg then asks Boss and his boys to give them a minute, and they all leave the room. And we then see Tommy and Dale headed back to the oil house in Tommy's truck. And Dale states, "I haven't done anything like that since 2016. The place is getting wild again." Tommy then replies, "I got to get my boy out of here before somebody kills him." Dale explains that they ran the killers off. And Tommy continues, "There's something about that boy just draws trouble to him like bugs to a light. He ain't mean enough for this place, Dale. He just ain't mean enough." Cut to black. And that was a fantastic way to end the episode. That last line right there, it sits. And that's what the last line in an episode is supposed to do. It's supposed to sit with you as you watch the credits roll, right? So, good on the writers for that. So, look, the first thing I'll say about this episode is that I'm surprised that Demi Moore agreed to take the role that she has, because she has essentially been relegated to a trophy wife with nothing of note to do besides swim laps in a pool, cheer her daughter on at college track meets, at a school her daughter really don't even want to go to, eat dinner next to her husband, and bring him drinks. And if the first 6 episodes are any indication, she'll have finished this season with her character having had zero impact on the story, which is disappointing given her standing in the industry. Really, a much less famous actress could have played this role, but I guess you can't fault Taylor Sheridan for pulling her if he had the ammo to get that done. Now, I have seen a couple of production stills where Tommy and Cammie are going to see each other again before the season's out. And I wonder if that might be at the hospital in Fort Worth, because if you notice that Monty is constantly checking his pulse, and Cammie's constantly telling him to take a pill and stuff like that. So you wonder if the stress of what's going on might eventually get to Monty, and, something might happen where Monty's going to be laid up for a little while. I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see, right? Now, in direct contrast, Rebecca has been kicking ass and taking names since she showed up in Midland. And the more we get to see her, the more you start to realize that she's not anybody's friend, right? We thought that she might have been kind of becoming friendly with Tommy, after she, had initially accused him of being reckless and negligent and all that kind of stuff like that. But the more I watch Rebecca, what I notice is that she's being friendly with Tommy to get information. She's trying to figure out how to do what she's been hired to do. And you get the sense now that anybody who stands in the way of that is going to wear one. Now, that makes you look at the TTP deposition from a few episodes with completely different eyes, because it's clear she didn't defend Tommy because she thought he was right, or even because she was starting to like him. She did it because that's what she was hired to do. She doesn't really care, like I said, who has to take an L so she can get a W. And watching her bulldoze Ariana and leverage the other two widows against her was downright tense, right? Great for her character. But it does make her, it does kind of put her in a position to be seen as unlikable. And so, we'll kind of see how that plays out, And, look, Rebecca is a badass when she's not threatening to sue men for gender discrimination. I hate that about her, right? Because if she really does have the biggest nuts in the room, then you don't have to revert to, oh, but I'm a girl. Like, I hate that about her, because she comes in hot. And then when people don't respond well to it, oh, I'll just sue you for gender discrimination. I'm like, that's weak sauce to me. But I get the feeling that, it might not be Monty that Tommy needs to be worried about. Even though I said in previous videos that I thought that Tommy and Monty might be headed for confrontation. I think I might take that back, especially after the conversation they had at the beginning of this episode, because I'm starting to think that the real danger from a litigation standpoint might just be Rebecca, and that it might not have anything to do actually with Monty. Because, Rebecca seems to be willing to burn everyone's house down if it means that she'll be warm. You know what I mean? And Monty and Tommy really do seem to have a bro relationship, even though, Monty kind of, snapped at Tommy a couple of episodes ago. But for the most part, there seems to be like a genuine respect that Monty has for Tommy. Even though it kind of seems like Tommy has respect for Monty, but at the same time, he's kind of envious. He's looking around going, the only difference between me and you is when you bet you won and when I bet I lost. Is kind of what you get, the sense that you get when you see the characters interact, and when you see Tommy interact, in Monty's house. Now, at this point, I'm convinced that Taylor Sheridan doesn't really know what to do with Angela, and that so far she's been placed in the same boat as Cammy, just with much more screen time. And, Angela's character has been relegated to noisy, sexed-up plot device, right? She's basically been made a part of this story to give Tommy's character something to set on the other side of the weighing scale, something that he will likely have to choose over the job before it's all said and done, and nothing more, right? I mean, Angela shows up at Victor's house this episode because she said she wanted to break things off with Victor face-to-face, because she felt like what she was doing with Tommy was wrong. But when she got to Victor's house and realized that Victor not only beat her to the punch, but that he had already replaced her with a younger model, she seemed to be upset at that fact, which might be in line with what we've seen from Angela's character to this point, with her vanity being a big part of her identity. But it makes Angela look small and much more simple than is necessary. And I just don't think Taylor Sheridan needed to write this character quite so far in this direction. I understand her being fiery. I understand her being kind of a sex pot. I understand her even being a trophy wife. But he could have made Angela a firecracker without leaning so heavily into the moronic trophy wife trope, right? Angela just doesn't seem smart, like no book smart whatsoever. And Angela says and does things that make her seem emotionally incompetent. And I don't think that makes her character complex. I think it makes her character a cartoon character, because Angela is a woman in her 40s. And at a lot of the times, she's basically like Tommy having another teenage daughter instead of a wife. Now, I think Ariana is the most compelling female character in the entire show, because while I think what she's doing with Cooper is also extremely stupid, I can at least understand why she's doing it, right? Ariana's lonely, and she doesn't seem like she's had much of an education, because she can't even, read bills, and she doesn't know what words like assertion and culpability and indemnify mean, and Ariana seems to be a street smart kind of girl, but a girl that will always need a man to take care of her, and that's why Cooper's there. So even though Ariana is making a bad call with Cooper, you kind of understand that she doesn't know how to be alone, so you understand the decision. And that's how it should be, right? When you write these characters, your audience needs to understand them above everything else, even if they don't agree with every decision that they make. That's the subtle hand you have to have in all this, right? As a screenwriter, you're God in the world you create, right? And you pull the strings and can make your characters say and do anything you want for any reason. But you have to be careful that the choices that you make don't undermine the point of the character's existence. For example, if you want people to respect a character's intelligence, like Rebecca, for example, then you can't have them saying and doing a bunch of stupid stuff, right? And I think that the writers also fail Rebecca again, like I said, by having her lean on being a girl when the going gets tough sometimes. But that's just me. But Ariana is your quintessential damsel in distress, and Cooper is Captain Sable, right? Willing to take an ass kicking for the chance to mow Shawty's lawn. I just don't understand. But Ariana has unnecessarily put Cooper at risk in more ways than one. Kissing him on the mouth in front of a man that you think might have a crush on you, a man who has already brandished a firearm in his presence and threatened to kill him on more than one occasion, is just dumb people shit, right? Now, she's angry at her circumstances. I get it. And Tommy even says as much in this episode that Ariana is hurting in a way that Cooper can't understand and that she's looking for some place to put it. But that makes her unpredictable. And I hope Cooper can come to see that before he gets himself killed messing around with Ariana. And we see that Ariana gave up Manuel with the gypsiness, right? The absolute gypsiness, right? Straight away. And it looks like Manuel may have been taken off the board here because I don't see him getting released after what he did to Cooper, violating his parole in the process. So we may have seen the last of him here, but that's not where I think Cooper and Ariana's relationship will be detrimental. Remember, Cooper is the other part of the whole Medina debacle, the only survivor of their accident. I think that may come to mean something bigger in the coming episodes, and I think it might pit he and Ariana on opposite sides of the issue, whether they want to be or mean to be or not. If, for example, Tommy has to make moves to save his son from a legal standpoint, and he has to sacrifice Ariana's situation in order to make that happen, I could see things getting real messy in the Norris household moving forward. Metaphorically speaking, since they don't all live together. Now, at the hospital, when Ariana went to listen to the doctor along with Ainsley and Dale, Ariana seemed to have a bit of an attitude with Ainsley when she asked who she was, which was another thing I thought was dumb because clearly they're representative of Cooper's family if they're talking to doctors. But she was looking at Ainsley like she was the other woman or some shit. And I just don't like it was an idiot creative writing decision. Look, it's the little things. I also don't understand why Cooper and Ainsley have to hate each other the way that they do, right? There's just no real need for it. They've been at each other for the last few episodes, but it also seems like they've been living separate for a while, seeing as how Cooper was a few months short of his geology degree, college degree, and Ainsley is still in high school. So them being this at odds is a bit strange, and it hasn't made a single bit of difference in the story so far. And so far, it just feels like an unnecessary subplot, right? But, we'll have to see if it pays some sort of dividends before the season is out. Maybe Cooper realizes that he's got to stand up for his sister, whether he wants to or not, because they're family. And so then I reserve the right to change my mind about that. Now, after finding out that Cooper was involved with Ariana, knowing exactly who she is, Tommy tries to get Cooper to slow down with her, but he doesn't look like he's prepared to listen, even though this is his second trip to the hospital. And I don't love that because it feels like with Cooper and with a lot of these characters, their season arcs are just driving in circles. It's like driving around a roundabout without getting off. You know what I'm saying? Angela doesn't really have anything to do except annoy the shit out of Tommy and disrupt his work life, right? Ainsley doesn't have anything to do but tan and drink margaritas with her mom like they're sisters instead of mother and daughter. Cooper just goes back and forth from the rig to the hospital. And Tommy is really the only character whose day-to-day goings-on is truly riveting, right? Now, he's the sun in this case, and everyone else are the planets that seem to orbit him, and some of them more interesting than others. Now, I did like the scene where Tommy beats the cowboy shit out of Manuel and Antonio with Boss's help. And you knew that would happen the moment Tommy was told what happened to his son. And it's what he should have done, right? Because he seems to take his job as his family's protector quite seriously, even though him and his family have their moments where they don't really get along. And in the aftermath of Manuel and Antonio's arrest, Tommy remarks to Dale that he has to get Cooper off the patch before somebody kills him. And I don't think that's an omen like some people seem to, at least not one that has any level of immediacy attached to it, because I just don't believe the writers would kill Cooper off in season 1 of the show. But I do think that Cooper's troubles are just beginning, and it'll be interesting to see how they evolve moving forward. Now, overall, I'd give this episode a 75%, or a 7.5 you're thinking IMDb score. Look, guys, in closing, there's not a whole lot to say that I haven't said already. I can see the shortcomings of this story pretty clearly at this point, but it's not that the premise of the show is necessarily flawed, but more like the development of a lot of its characters has proven to be subpar, right? I still think the show is very good. In case some of you guys are wondering, I still think the show is good, but I do also think that the women of Landman have kind of gotten the short end of the stick here. You know, like I said again, Cammy is your typical beautiful, rich trophy wife, and that's all she's been portrayed as to this point. Angela, also a trophy wife, but in a much different way, much more skeezy, right? And neither of these women have had very much to do here. The only difference, like I said, is that Angela gets much more screen time, as she does absolutely nothing except manufacture drama for the show. Right? And like her mother, Ainsley doesn't have anything to do either, even though, again, like I said, I think she's extremely charming. She's just cute as a button, right? But like I said, she needs to hurry up and get back in school, and I think the writers, if they go that route, they can salvage her character by giving her friends and a life that exists outside of her mother and father and brother, right? Rebecca at least serves a purpose in moving and helping to advance the plot, though I don't really like her character anymore, right? She's a bitch, if you feel me. And Ariana, like I said, may be the most compelling character, though I think she's also problematic on so many levels, the biggest one being that she's the ultimate liability, right? Now, I hope the writers can salvage a bit of the mess that they've created where the females of Landman are concerned, because though I think the show is still one of the better shows I've seen on television this year, I have to admit that if the season ended today, I would be thoroughly disappointed in the way that the females of this show have or haven't contributed to this story from a narrative perspective. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to watch the 6th episode of Landman yet? If you have, how did you think it measured up to the episodes that came before? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also support the channel now by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd really appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themadscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.